Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Exade Replay, coming to you with episode 38 of the series. Let's get right into it. So this week on the show, we don't have a lot to talk about as far as the opening goes. This is plot heavy, a lot of drama in this episode, so let's go ahead and see what we're dealing with as far as getting Taiga back to health. So as we saw at the end of last week's episode, Taiga is in a bad way. Having taken a shot directly to the chest from graphite, he needs surgery and he needs it now. Now the thing about it is, this is another episode where we actually get a little bit more technical medical jargon, which I've checked into and it actually does hold up. So let's go ahead and talk about what it is that Taiga's dealing with physically. We're told by the attending physicians they're working on Taiga that the problem that we're dealing with primarily has to do with his heart. The problem that Taiga has right now is that he has what's called a cardiac tamponade. What that means is that the fluid around the heart is constricting the heart and the heart is not able to do its job and pump out the amount of blood that it needs to. Beyond that, he actually also needs a valve replacement on his heart. What that also means is that the heart is not capable of pushing out the blood that it needs to sustain life. So essentially what that means is this is definitely life-threatening surgery that absolutely needs to be worked on. Now, of course, we're told that Hiro is the only physician who can handle this. Hiro, of course, has his own problems in that Masamune Dan has given him his orders. You can go ahead and show up, but you can't actually do the operation successfully. It's dangerous, people will understand, but you have to make sure that he dies, otherwise Saki will die. Now, from looking into it, this is actually a very involved surgery, so yes, it would be understandable if Hiro was to mess up. Now, the thing about it is, this whole time, Hiro's been up on this idea that he's the best doctor around. In fact, this is something that's been reinforced since that's the only thing that Saki can say in her current data form. Now, thankfully, Hiro does decide to show up to the relief of everybody there at the CR, especially Saiba Niko, but we see that he has to go ahead and get to work right away. Now, based off all of the information that we have here on this kind of operation, part of what Hiro has to do is basically open up the heart, open up the chest cavity, so that they can relieve some of that pressure that's around the heart. Once that's done, he actually has to replace a valve there in Taiga's chest. Now, it's important to realize what exactly he is doing and how this should potentially affect Taiga for the rest of the series. Hiro states that an ascending aorta valve replacement has to be done after the pericardial window has been done, where the pressure is relieved off the heart, and then they actually have to replace the valve. The thing about that is that there's a lot of drawbacks to that. There's two things that they could have done. One, they could have replaced it mechanically, put in a part into Taiga's heart. The other part being they could have used a tissue graft from, say, a pig's heart, which has been known to be done before. The thing is, both of these have drawbacks for the foreseeable future. If there's a mechanical one placed in, that could last well beyond Taiga's lifetime, but the problem with that is that realistically, Taiga would have to be on blood thinners for the rest of his life. So if that was the case, he would be that much more susceptible to bleeding out if he were to take on more injury. The second option on that would have been if it had been a tissue replacement with, say, a valve from a pig's heart. Yes, that would have solved the problem and makes sense. They wouldn't need to replace his entire heart, but those tend to give out earlier for people who are younger and are more active, like Taiga actually is, considering he's a common writer. The thing about that one is he would constantly have to go in for surgery every 15 years or so. So the thing about it is, this will affect him for the rest of his life, and I do hope that the series addresses that as well. Now, of course, Taiga, yes, is a very prevalent problem, but we also have to deal with everybody else reacting to this. So Hiro's dad and just about everybody else want to believe that Hiro will do the best thing for the patient, since it seems that everybody's still convinced that eventually he'll come around to his senses and that he'll do the right thing. Saiba Niko, on the other hand, is still very emotional. She's still very tied to Taiga, and I'm starting to wonder where they're going to take this, because as far as, I guess, romance is concerned in Kamen Rider, we've had a few romances here and there over the years, but they don't really play them up too much. Maybe in a later movie, or a spin-off, or a movie war, but in the series proper, it doesn't often happen. But here, it's kind of hard to look past what Saiba Niko's feelings are towards Taiga when she's that torn up about him being in such a bad state. And of course, the other major problem is Masamune Dan, is Kronos. So now we see that he's playing dirty. The fact that he's told Hiro to basically kill somebody 2 episodes running, and now he's starting to play dirty with everybody else. When Emu does realize that he is the person who's told Hiro to do this thing, Emu decides to step in. But of course, before that, we also see that Palad, Graphite, Genmu and Laser also tried to fight him and realized that he's playing dirty as well. Now the thing about it is, it makes sense for Masamune Dan to start developing this dirty mindset, the fact that he doesn't have to have an even playing field anymore. We see that he had a plan before. He had this whole structure that he had a right-hand man and a left-hand man. That all was taken away from him, so now he wants to win at any cost. Now admittedly, when you have 4 different people, nay 5 different people on you trying to defeat you, you do need a new edge. So now what Masamune Dan has decided to do is take control of the energy items, the little metals that we see strewn about all over the place. Now admittedly, we do see, it's kind of obvious that they've used the old O's core metal holder from back in Kamen Rider O's, and they've repurposed it to hold these Butoba Soul medals, which work in arcade games over there in Japan. Beyond that, he's using these to buff himself to take on Palad, Graphite, and whoever else would come against him. Now overall, in every fight that we've seen in this episode, Kronos basically deems every other Kamen Rider as being somebody who needs to be done away with, starting with Palad and Graphite. Now we do see that they're going to be dealt with a little bit more next episode, so they retreat for a bit. Laser tries to fight him for a little bit, but he has to retreat back to try and warn the CR about what Hiro may or may not do during the surgery, which leaves Genmu, which leaves Kuroto Dan. Now we've been wondering about this for a couple of episodes now, just how long it would take for him to eat through all of his different lives, and we see here that he eats through 23 different lives, leaving him with 70. Now, you might wonder, how long did it take for him to eat through all of those? Well, that actually seems to time out with the amount of time it would have taken for Hiro to do that surgery. From what we're shown in the episode, Hiro finished the surgery a little bit after 3 a.m. Now, based off the information we got from last episode, information that we do have readily available about the surgery that he did do, and then the timing from what they're shown in this episode, it all evens out. So basically what happened was this. Since at sunset last week, that was when Taiga got hurt, sunset in Tokyo about nowadays takes place at about 7 p.m. The surgery would have had to have started at 11 p.m. for Hiro to be out of there by 3, which means between 7 and 11, that's the setup, that's how long it took for Taiga to get to the hospital, get him prepped, and get him into surgery for Emu to take a look at him with the other doctors at the beginning of the episode. Now from the time it takes for Hiro to finish the surgery and then go out and help Emu, who of course left during the middle of that to try and fight Kronos, that's about 4:30 in the morning, since that's when sunrise happens in Tokyo, which gives him give or take about an hour and a half for him to contemplate things, get dressed, and decide what he's going to do when he goes out to meet Kronos and Exade. So really, when you put all of that together, that's a pretty concise timeline, and I appreciate that Toei and the writers did as much work to make sure that it all made sense when you actually look at it and see it all out there, like, wow, this actually makes sense. That's about how long it would take from there to there, and then there to there. They actually did their homework. And again, let's not forget the symbolism there with the use of the sun. Last week we had the sun set, this week we have the sun rise, and it's very symbolic of Hiro's rebirth as a hero. We see here that he's making a very large sacrifice. He decides to go ahead and take the one piece that's holding him back off the table and decide to let Kronos do away with Saki's data. He's basically saying goodbye already. The better part about that is that as a character, he decides to not even directly address that. He knows that's going to happen, but he more so presses Emu, I need your power, I need you to fight alongside me, I'm sorry for the way I've been acting this whole time. This shows his growth. This episode, more than anything, shows Hiro's growth as a character and really rounds out his arc over the course of the series, and I love that it feels so natural here. And the way they display his resolve, this quiet resolution that, you know what, I've decided to give up on my dream of getting Saki back, but I'm going to do right by me as a doctor and right by me as a common writer. He joins up with Emu to do a beautiful double rider kick, which does result in Kronos still getting away, but when it's all said and done, he still needs a moment. The sky decides to go ahead and cry along with him. Emu decides to give him his space, and it's good that he did, but he still has to deal. The cries that he gives there on the ground, again, another bit of symbolism there in the series. The rain only comes in the series when somebody is lost. Same thing happened with Kiria, same thing happens here with Saki, and I love that they kept that. In the end, we do see that everybody's back there in the CR with Taiga showing his recovery. I do love now how we're getting to see the relationship between Taiga and Hiro come full circle, in that at first they were at odds with each other, even though they did technically have the same goal in mind, but now they're trying to be the bigger men, the both of them apologizing. Hey, I'm sorry for the way I treated you. No, I should be the one apologizing to you. Now they're going to fight more alongside each other as brothers, I would almost argue, since they've gotten past all of the stuff they've had to do, since we've already dealt with Saki, and now Taiga owes Hiro his life. Now again, I do want to go ahead and bring up that there are things that we'll have to see from Taiga if they're going to keep a little bit of realism here. For one thing, he would need to be kept in observation after that surgery for at least 3 days. Beyond that, they would suggest that it would take at least 4 to 6 weeks before the patient does any heavy lifting. scripting, but based off everything that we have here, seeing that as we probably have about 10 episodes left in this series, he's probably going to ignore that, which could technically lead to more medical complications, so I'm wondering whether or not they're going to keep that. And on next week's episode, we'll get to see how Masamune is going to have to adjust his plan, seeing as he lost his other fighter. So we're going to see that Saiba Niko gets infected with Bugster virus again. I hate that they just keep doing that to her. I wish they would treat her better, but you know what, whatever. And we're also going to have to see how Paradox is going to deal with the fact that if he's lost, then Emu loses his power to transform. So we're going to have to see just how they're going to resolve that. And again, I love the way this episode was done. Very well paced. I love the fact that they didn't push the humor so much in order to tell this dramatic story, and it needed to be told. I appreciate that they didn't try to push any other agenda. There's no insert themes. It's all story here, and I appreciate that they're doing the work to put in to what was originally a comical premise that you could have laughed off, but this is a very serious story being told in a serious way, and I think anybody could enjoy this if they've sat through thus far. But those are my thoughts on the episode. I want to hear what you guys thought, so let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. First off, the comedy aspect of the show. Do you wish there had been a little bit more levity in this episode, or do you like the fact that it was dramatic and heavy as it was? Next, Kuroto Dan. So since he's eaten through 23 of his lives in this episode, just how much longer do you think it'll be before he wastes the rest of them? Will it be just one more episode, or will he last to the end of the series? And lastly, Niko and Taiga. So what exactly do you think the nature of their relationship is? Do you think they're telling the truth about, oh, it's just doctor-patient, or is there something deeper? You tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 38 of Exade Replay for episode 38 of the series, Period of Tears. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.